Here it is. It's funny, Jen, it's actually a kind of a light dispatch for us because it's not much to talk about. I mean, I guess I should rephrase it. There's a ton to talk about, but it's all Omicron. Omicron has eaten the entire news cycle. There's a few other things we could mention, but the entire week in the federal government has been, well, what do we do about this? The provinces, it's been, what do we do about this? The cities, it's been, what do we do about this? I wrote a series for TVO this week, 3 articles. I wrote it. I said to my editor, I don't know what's going to happen. I have no clue what's about to come at us. I'm going to go talk to a bunch of experts, and hopefully by the end we'll figure it out. I've written 3 articles. I still don't know what's about to happen.
So Matt, like on a scale of like Costco trip fear here, how concerned are you right now about Omicron?
I'm not concerned at all about me. And I know that sounds selfish. I've never really experienced the pandemic through the lens of me. I looked at that early data when it came out in January, February. I'm like, I'm a healthy 30 something. Like I wasn't worried about the outcome for me. My concern has always been systemic effects. Never thought I would die of COVID. Wondered if I would have food in my grocery store. So I have broken out my early 2020 checklist, and I've been running down them again. But when I said this to you before we started rolling, I don't think this is going to be early 2020. And I know there's been a lot of panic and doom and gloom out there. I'm not panicked and I'm not doom and gloom. But the one way this does remind me of early 2020 is that something is about to happen and we don't know what it's going to be like to live through it. And the range of scenarios seems to be that Omicron is so mild, it's going to be something, it's going to wash over us like a gentle rain. Or that it's milder than Delta, but still nasty enough to kind of make it up on volume, right? Go, okay, well, it's only going to create 1/3 the severe illness, but we're going to have 10 times the cases, which means you're fucked. And like, so we've got these options between absolutely nothing to worry about and greatest crisis of the pandemic. I have no empirical evidence to support either position. I have no idea what's going to happen. I know that I'm vaccinated. I'm now double vaccinated. I now qualify for a booster, or at least I will as of Monday. And who knows? And I know it's a very strange place to be in mentally, but this is what it does remind me of early 2020. And the one thing I would add is, and this is going to be I can say subtweet. It's going to be a sub comment of a whole lot of people I know. I don't have the emotional impulse to sort of performatively work through my anxiety by declaring myself on one side or another. I see people out there today who are convinced that the next 3 months are going to be a slaughter. And they don't know that. They're filling in the gaps in their knowledge with their fear. And there are people out there who are convinced that this is a complete nothing burger, like I said, a gentle rain, and it's going to wash over us easily. And they don't know that either. They're filling in the blanks in their knowledge with their hope. And I just don't feel the urge to do that. And this has just always been kind of my personality. It has never felt like a defeat to me to go, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I think that's actually part of the job, but I think that is something a lot of people are struggling with right now. A lot of people are leaning into conclusions with zero evidence to base it on.
That I think is about right. So I mean, like as well, I mean, I deal with anxiety, sort of chronic anxiety. They finally medicated me for that. And I've been way off Twitter since then. It's been really good. It's been a real improvement. Yeah, I mean, I sort of perform my anxiety in a slightly different way, where I'm just like, I have anxiety and this is what I'm afraid of, and I just kind of lay it out on the page. And like, this is where I'm going back and forth. I, like you, kind of haven't really taken a bet on one side or the other. I guess I probably am leaning a little bit more toward optimism on the grounds, not necessarily that I think that it's not going to be a big deal, but on the grounds that, like, one way or the other, it's going to be over soon. What we do know is that this thing is so virulent and it spreads through communities so quickly that it's either going to be bad or not bad, but we're going to know really quickly. and then this will be done. Like, we're not going to be, and this is, I think, what caused my anxiety at the beginning of 2020 was the thought of being locked up in my house for months and months and months, or years and years. That was heavy for me. I don't feel that this time. Again, probably the medication's helping, but also because I know that even if it's the bad scenario, we're going to rip off the bandage and it's going to be done. And like, it's going to get really bad for a couple of weeks, and we'll do what we can to help. And then it's going to be over. The whole period of like, well, we're going to be in another lockdown for 6 months or a year. That's not going to happen in this scenario, because the thing is just going to go way too fast. It's too virulent, and it's too contagious. So there's a little bit of like, I don't know if that's a creepy way of describing optimism, but like, I just based on what I'm afraid of and where my anxieties are, that's kind of hopeful for me to know that like we are actually at the end of this one way or the other.
I don't think it's creepy.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it's creepy. I would say this: there is a peace in knowing there's nothing left you can do.
That's right. Yes, that's kind of where it's not nihilism, but there is a certain like, there's nothing really left to be done here, realistically, policy wise. This thing is so contagious, it's so virulent. You can't lock people up to the extent that you would need to lock them up. Any kind of policy changes we make at this point are going to be diminishing returns. There are reasonable precautions we can take as individuals, as you've said in the past. Like we can not be stupid, don't go to super spreader events, wear masks, get boosted, get tested. But that's really the end of it. And like, you're going to get Omicron, you just have to accept that and live your life. And that's just what it's going to be.
So much. I mean, you know me, the ex-military historian. I always boil these things down into historical illusions. What we've been doing the last 21 months, and it was a good strategy, was trying to defeat this thing surgically. Protect the population, buy time to bring in interventions. Now, surgically didn't work. We had to use blunt instruments because we only really had that. But the idea was that we are going to avoid mass infection long enough to get vaccines, long enough to get therapeutics, long enough to develop testing and tracing. I think we've drifted away from those targets, but I mean, that always was the plan, right? Canadian, mostly across the world, the strategy has always been, we are going to do everything in our power to prevent an uncontained outbreak, because we need time to do the things that will make would make an uncontained outbreak manageable. Vaccines, first invent them, then make them, then distribute them. Testing. At the beginning, we didn't know how to test for this thing. That's something we had to start from scratch. All these things. And what has become clear to me now is that phase of this is over. We are into now, the illusion I've been using has been where we're just going to have to repel borders. Like the enemy is now close enough that they're coming over. A doctor I spoke to a few days ago told me, and it made me laugh because his language so closely mirrored my own. He said, the long range artillery phase of this thing is over. We're into the close quarters action. We're fighting this thing with bayonets now. He goes, it's going to swamp us. It is going to spread everywhere. It is more infectious than the measles. And this is no longer, he said to me, he says, this is no longer going to be fought at the societal level of public health interventions. It's going to be fought in every individual's immune system. And we have probably, God bless us, done enough to make sure that most of us are going to be just fine. And that's why I'm not worried about my personal outcome.
There's also something that's really important that you mentioned here, and I don't think we talk about this enough, and that is NPIs, or non-pharmaceutical interventions, lockdowns, masks, all this kind of stuff. They buy us time.
Yep.
Right? They buy us time, right? They don't stop the pandemic, they prolong the pandemic. They buy us some time. So what are you doing with the time that you have bought with these NPIs? That's the question, because you can't justify the NPI if you can't show a return on the NPI, right? You can't justify locking down society unless you can say, we're buying 2 weeks because we are going to get this out of these 14 days.
Yep.
But we're now at a point where this thing's so contagious that any kind of NPI is at the diminishing returns curve of the phase, which means, yeah, sure, we could shut down society and maybe we would buy ourselves an extra 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days. That's not going to make a difference.
What are
It's
we
not
going to
going to
do?
make it. Yeah. What do there's nothing that we can do in that short amount of time frame that is going to make really any kind of substantive difference to our hospital capacity, to our interventions, to our vaccine production. Like, it's just, we're past the point where we can reasonably buy time on this one. All we can do at this point is basically let it go and get it done.
I was talking. Yeah, I was talking with David Rivoli a few days ago of the logic about this. The problem is you and I are wrong in the very narrow and technical sense that you could always use one more day. And I mean, I grant the point, right?
Sure.
Like, you can always use another day. Like, if someone offered me the choice, do you want another day or do you want another day? I'll take the other day. So you can always boost another 100,000 people. You can always whatever, right? But on the macro scale that we're talking about, it's going to rip through us faster than we can respond to. And
which is why I say diminishing returns.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So
diminishing returns.
In the abstract, can you buy another day? Yeah. Can you buy another week? Yeah, maybe. Is it worth it? I have supported every previous lockdown in Ontario because each time we had a specific goal. The first lockdown, we hoped maybe we could crush it, break the transmission chains. We had to give the hospital system time to learn what it was up against. We couldn't even test. That was the purpose of that. The second lockdown was the vaccines were right on the horizon, but we didn't have even the long-term care homes vaccinated yet. This is Ontario, obviously. I know it's different elsewhere. That was the justification for that one. We had to protect the vulnerable. The third one just got so horribly out of control. We had to shut it all down because the healthcare system was this close to collapsing. That was the justification for that one. I don't see a justification for it this time.
Yeah, if the healthcare system is going to collapse, the healthcare system is going to collapse at this point, and nothing we really do is going to make any substantial difference. That's when we say each lockdown is buying successively less and less and less. That's what we mean by diminishing returns. The first lockdowns were completely unavoidable. The second lockdowns bought us a little bit of time. The third lockdowns bought us a little bit of less, and it's a last lockdown. A week, 2 weeks is not going to make a difference to the number of deaths in the long run. It's on a macro scale, it just doesn't make a difference.
And we should not lose sight of the fact, as painful as the lockdowns have been, and I've been fairly calm about them, but I haven't enjoyed them either. They bought time. I was vaccinated during the third lockdown, and by the time we were lifting it, my vaccination was complete. And I'm a healthy guy in my 30s, right? If they had gotten down to me, presumably they'd gotten all the people above me. So that was worth it here. But I think the one thing I would say, and I'm not saying this from any kind of alarm, because again, I stress maybe this thing is a nothing burger, but if nothing else, the speed that this thing is going to move, I think is going to blow people away. I was looking, give me a second here. Sorry, I'm being bad here. I'm looking at my screen as we go here. So 1 week ago today, the city of Toronto, the 416, reported 189 cases. That had doubled in about 2 weeks. So Toronto actually had been very, very low for a long time. We were following Alberta's third wave experience, which is that the cities were highly vaccinated. We were fine. It was the outlying areas that were burning. As recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, Ontario was Toronto, 3 million of us were double-digit daily COVID cases. 1 week ago, as we filmed this, we were under 200. We reported 750 today.
Yeah, so, and we're going to start to get into a doubling rate that's closer to every 2 days to 3 days.
2 to 3 days. So just back of the napkin math here, let's go with a doubling rate of 3 days. So by Sunday, Toronto, instead of 750, it's going to be 1,500. And then by Wednesday, it's going to be 3,000. And then potentially by Saturday, it's 6,000. Now, there are some things that are about to change. Schools are ending, not because we're closing them, because the Christmas holidays are here. The capacity limits will change. And I also think people will start modifying their own personal behavior at this point.
Yep.
But the speed that this thing is going to move, we have no experience with this. And I don't even mean pandemic experience. I asked one of our epidemiologists here in Ontario, an infectious disease expert, who I've relied on as a voice of reason during this pandemic. His name's Dr. Zane Chagla. He's not an alarmist. He's a pure data science guy, very calm, great sense of humor, like a good guy to talk to because he keeps his head about him. I asked him, what is Omicron going to do? And he goes, it's going to move through Ontario like measles goes through a classroom of unvaccinated kids.
Oh, good.
Okay. And then another doctor I spoke to, Dr. Brian Goldman, he thought about that and said, yeah, that makes sense. He says we could also compare it to norovirus on a cruise ship. So, okay. So I don't know if people are mentally ready for this. And I think there could be a lot of panic and stress based entirely on case counts before we even know what the hospitalization is like. The other wild card, like I said before, I'm not worried about my personal outcomes. I don't know what it's like in Alberta. So we pretty aggressively in Ontario order people into isolation if they're a close contact. Dr. Chagla had said to me, if our daily case counts go to 10,000 a day, every person has 4 or 5, 6 close contacts. Say it's 5. You're going to be putting 10,000 positive cases into isolation a day plus 50,000 close contacts. It says do that for a week, you've put 350,000 people into isolation. Society will not function. So he says, if we don't figure out a way to more rapidly get people back into the workforce, particularly essential industries, we're in deep shit, not because of the virus, but because of our health measures.
And that's where rapid testing ought to be coming in.
Yeah. So he had proposed close contacts be tested with a rapid test on day 1 after exposure and day 5 after exposure. If both tests are negative and no symptoms, that person goes back to work. Even with that, it's funny. Well, it's not funny. It's not good. So I know all the Ontario guys who are modeling this stuff, right? I've talked to all of them. They are worried about the virus because obviously there's a lot of unknowns. They're also buying freezers and stocking them up with food because they're worried not that all the Loblaws employees are going to die. They're worried they'll be at home watching Netflix.
Yeah. So basically, that's where things could get really, really weird and really, really pear-shaped.
For about 8 weeks. And then
for about 8 weeks. Yeah. And then it's over. Like things, like I said, it's not going to be, it probably isn't going to be like freezer trucks worth of bodies. It's probably going to be like,
it could be freezer trucks in parking lots with no drivers. Freezer trucks
or it's going to be like no, your local grocery store just isn't open. And sorry, that's because there's no staff. But that being said, I think that what will essentially happen is that the isolation regime will collapse.
Oh yeah.
I think realistically that's just what's going to happen. There's going to be no enforcement mechanism to force that many people home, and they're not going to.
And the thing is, if this thing moves the way we think it does, the testing and tracing system is going to collapse next week.
It's essentially our testing and tracing system has already collapsed here in Alberta. Like we gave up on it months ago. So like
we're getting there in parts of Ontario. And the funny thing is too, this will anyone who's out to paint us as alarmists, Jen, is going to just have a field day ripping quotes out of context on this. I'm not saying that with any particular alarm, but I went online a few days ago. I ordered a bunch of these rapid tests. I have no faith that the government of Ontario is going to be able to actually give me a lab-based PCR test starting anytime next week.
Oh God, no.
And we're already hearing in parts of the province, it's several days to get an appointment and then several days to get a result. We've had, like my kids have had colds and stuff during this pandemic. We haven't had COVID that we know of. And the testing system in Ontario has functioned very well. Kids got the sniffles, take them to a hospital, zoink. They don't enjoy getting the swab in the nostrils, but we get the results the next day. That's going to be gone in a few days. We're just not going to be able to do it anymore. And here we loop back to what I was saying to you about just the sense of peace. I accept that this is going to happen. Like, there have been times in this pandemic when either as an individual, as a husband, a dad, a guy kind of responsible for the household, that I've been worried that there was more stuff that I could be doing that I hadn't done yet. And I felt the sense of urgency to do the things, right? As a journalist, I've had moments of kind of like, we got to shine a light on this. We got to make sure that people in power understand what's happening. There's nothing left I can do. Yep. And whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And I hope it's fine. It could be fine. Could be terrible.
Well, let's work through that scenario, because I think the second part of our dispatch here is going to be very much, I know this is going to sound really morbid, but if this does turn out to be truly nothing burger, and by nothing burger, let me qualify that. I mean, like,
it's so mild it doesn't crash the hospitals.
Yeah, it's so mild it doesn't crash the hospitals. yes, there's another sort of 100 people in ICU in Ontario, but there's maybe another 600 cases, but we're not talking 60,000. You know what I mean? We're not talking like there's not another 1,000 ICU cases, but there may be an extra 100. So essentially, it turns out to be it just sweeps through. Everyone is going to get a cold of some kind or get a little sick, or some people get a little more sick, but whatever. But essentially, it's a couple extra dozen ICU cases. If it turns out to be one of those, I think that's the last shred of credibility. It's gone.
Yep.
I think it's the last shred of credibility for public health. I think it's the last shred of credibility for the media. I think that, we've been going so hard for so long and hitting the panic button and not being able to communicate nuance and individual risk in a more sophisticated way. And as a result, we just go panic, 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 panic. That's the only button we've learned how to push. We haven't improved our communication skills on any significant front there. And we are going to run headlong into the consequences of that, if it's good and if it's bad. If it's bad, we're going to run into the consequences of that more people didn't take it seriously because they tuned out. And if it's, the best case scenario and Omicron doesn't turn out to be a big deal or doesn't turn out to be a huge deal, essentially the last sort of trust the experts, believe the media kind of stuff, I think it's the last shred of credibility is going to be gone here because we will have called wolf and the wolf didn't come.
I agree. My agreement is somewhat nuanced by a few things, but I agree. A couple of the nuances are this. I have a nasty habit of blaming the reader. I think I've told you this story before. This is when I was at the Post editorial board years ago. We worked hard on this. We put together a gorgeous full week of articles, series, 5 or 6 articles about the responsibility to protect. We went out, we talked to experts, we talked to leading lights in humanitarian engagement. We talked to some of the smartest brains out there about United Nations peacekeeping operations. We put together 6 articles that were genuinely something to be proud of. Like, it was really good journalism. And 2 or 3 days before the series of articles started, Tiger Woods' sex scandal broke.
Oh no.
And no one read the articles that we had spent weeks on. No. And
stupid readers.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? I agree with you. I agree with you in the main. The media's credibility has been damaged during this, and some of that is fair criticism. Some of it's not.
It's not.
I think the media, which is a husk of its former self and has a fraction of the resources, has worked incredibly hard to report this accurately to a public that, first of all, doesn't know the first fucking thing about any of this stuff. Second, doesn't want to talk about it or hear about it. And third, and I think this is more important, I've told you this before, we might have even talked about these on these videos. I don't think it took long for the broader public to just fold COVID-19 into their pre-existing partisan worldview. Agreed. So
that's not the media's fault. What I think the media's fault is, and I mean, we've made these critiques the line multiple times, and that is there's been a consistent lack of contextualization of the risk. There's been a consistent, like, hospital about to collapse, and then you put through the numbers and it's like there's an extra 12 people in hospital in a city of 500,000. There's been a consistent lack of ability to sort of detach. I mean, the media is not immune from that partisan stripe. I mean, here in Alberta, if something was coming out that Dina Hinshaw said that the left generally agreed with, it was Dina Hinshaw as a hero. The second Dina Hinshaw started to take a more sort of COVID is endemic tack, it was Dina Hinshaw's in the pocket fire Dina Hinshaw. She's a murderous person in the pocket of Jason Kenney. Like, the media participated in that narrative. There's been a consistent inability to sort of argue through things like vaccine mandates. It's considered verboten or even anti-vax now to have issues with vaccine mandates. There's been no openness to a dialogue on any of those issues. It's been, like I said, a lot of the stuff about the risk of COVID is just totally isolated from context of risk of a lot of other diseases. no one's really willing to talk about, okay, there's downsides, and like even the conversation we just had about like the diminishing returns around lockdowns, that conversation isn't being had in a sophisticated or nuanced way. Instead, it's just like, call the most alarmist doctor you can get on the phone, get the most alarmist quote, put it in the headline. And it's been that again and again and again and again. And I don't blame people for not trusting the media on COVID anymore. I think we really fucked up. I think we did.
How here's the thing though, and it's not that I disagree with you in the main, but I think the nuance you're missing here is, how is the media supposed to know who the credible doctors are? Like, how
think it through. Like, you and I know who the credible doctors are.
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
How come we're holding our peers to a lower standard than we generally hold ourselves? And like, you and I have also been pretty good about admitting when we were wrong about stuff. Like, it's like, and like explaining through our thought processes when like, this is why I was wrong and here's where I think I screwed up. Like, how come we're holding ourselves to those standards, not everybody else? How many times has the Ontario Science Table been wrong, like grossly wrong about its models, and this just doesn't get commented on, aside from a few weirdos like you and me and Colby Goff?
Every time.
Like nobody's, and then the next time they send out another projections showing the case counts through the roof, it's the same thing. Oh my god, we've all got to panic. Like, you've been wrong every time before. Like this is the third part of the dispatch that I kind of want to talk about, and that is, I do think that there is finally a certain degree of skepticism, small amount of skepticism, that's starting to leak through. You had like the National Post editorial board saying no more lockdowns. You had Canadaland and Nora Loretto and Jesse Brown on Shortcuts today, basically saying, on Thursday, saying this is getting ridiculous. So I do think that there's a little bit of sort of opening the door toward allowing a degree of skepticism. And for example, just openly calling out one of the science table doctors, Dr. Juki, about one of his statements to Omicron, that the fact that Omicron is mild is a quote unquote myth. A radically incorrect, wrong, and irresponsible thing to say that is shot through with paternalism, just counterproductive paternalism through and through. There's finally a degree of like somebody in our media sphere willing to be like, hey, that's actually, we should really be questioning that. We shouldn't be taking that and be reporting it at face value, because that's just self-evidently nonsense. So I think that, and this is just a small little thing, but I do think that there is an openness, a slight opening of the door toward being more skeptical about what some of the scientists and doctors and some of the messaging that on COVID that is finally starting to seep into mainstream media in a way that I don't think was there even 3 or 4 months ago.
It's funny too, because I'll say this. You and I talked about this before the video. I don't know if you're right about that, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I just haven't seen it. So like, you might have seen it. My sense is I have not seen any appreciable tilt towards a change in the coverage on this. I could be wrong. Like, you might have seen something that I haven't, and I'm not arguing against you. I'm just telling you, I haven't seen what you've seen. One of the things that I don't think we should discount, and it actually goes to a lot of what we're talking about here. It goes to the public not being willing to listen when given nuanced information. It goes perhaps to an increasing skepticism among the media. I think it even goes to how you and I are feeling. We were talking about our own sense of concern or otherwise at the beginning. The one thing that I tell people this all the time, very few people take it seriously. The thing you cannot underestimate now is exhaustion. And what I mean by that is I wrote I think it was a video actually, where I did a video for the National Post, as I do every week, where I had said that our political leaders in Ottawa, Parliament, are exhausted. And that's not good, because if there is another crisis, we need people to actually be able to make good decisions. And the response I got from idiots was, oh, the poor politicians, they're making 150,000. No, you idiots. Like, this is not what I'm telling you. This is not about having sympathy for the politicians. This is about understanding the guy who is going to be sitting on the committee that makes the decisions that determine the outcome of this crisis is sleep deprived and depressed and suffering from an anxiety disorder after the worst 20 months of his life. And if you, as an element of planning, do not factor in diminishing human returns, for you're lying to yourself. And this is part of what I was talking about this week when I was talking with some of the Ontario guys on this. So in the third wave, which was for our hospital system, the worst, Ontario's ICU system, intensive care units, normally operates about 1,800 beds. By ripping staff from other parts in the system, we added 400, and we had 900 COVID patients in the system. So that left 1,300 beds for every car crash, every guy falling off a ladder, every gunshot, et cetera, et cetera. I was talking about the guys this week. I'm like, could we do that again? They don't think we could. They don't think there'd be enough people left in the system to surge it as large as we had last time. And that's, people talk about, oh, why is our hospital system not bigger now? With what people? We've actually been willing to throw the money at. We have spent the money on the hospital system. We cannot find the trained personnel. We can't spare the personnel to train new personnel. These things can become self-sustaining problems, right? When you run out of personnel, you can't train new personnel because you need personnel to oversee the trainees. Mm-hmm. And
to me that does indicate a failure, and it's a failure that we can't fix now. But like at the outset of this pandemic, when this first ran, we should have done a crash training course, and we should have gotten people doing simple bringing, like, you know, we should have. The thing that I will never understand is, like, why didn't they recruit 1,000 useless housewives like me to go do basic stuff like sit at the front hospital door, do triaging, to free up a nurse for that? Like, you know, you could have crash trained a lot of us to do that basic, simple stuff.
Yeah,
but nobody had the foresight.
No, I think we can, but I don't think that's the problem. We could throw 1,000 crash trained duty nurses into the system, but none of them would be running ventilators in 2 years.
Oh God, no. Like, for sure, nobody would do that. Absolutely. But then you then could have crash trained the nurses who are now doing triage to do higher level stuff. Again, I understand the capacity isn't about physical beds. It's about staff. But the fact that nobody had the foresight at the beginning of this pandemic to be like, shit, we need to double our pool of nurses. How do we do that in an emergency wartime? Like, in wartime, we trained up nurses and we sent them off to fucking war. Like, and we did that pretty bloody quickly. After 2 years, we should have been able to figure out a system like this, and we haven't.
You can always train the nurses who stitch up the minor wounds. It's the high level stuff that's hard. And the other thing,
I'm not disputing it. I'm not saying you could have crash trained ventilator nurses or ICU nurses. I'm saying you could have crash trained people to do basic stuff, and there wasn't even attempts to do that. You know what I'm saying?
What I wonder is 2 years ago, 21 months ago, 18 months ago, if we had actually talked about this, crash trained nurses for a year and a half from now, I think people would have thought you sounded crazy.
I wrote that column in the Flames. I literally at the outside of this pandemic, I was like, if you want to treat this like a war, that means conscripting people into doing these kinds of jobs, and we never did.
Did it sound then like the idea?
No, I was super rational in the fact that the column was well received. It just nobody again. It's a combination of, I think, union pressures, because of course the last thing the nurses unions are going to want is like a bunch of undertrained people coming in and sort of undervaluing their work. And then the second problem was just the lack of foresight, the lack of imagination. Nobody really thought the problem through to its logical conclusion.
Well, we've been talking here. Apparently, just got a text message. Hopefully the ding didn't come through, but apparently, I'm just scrolling the story now. While we've been talking, Quebec schools have been ordered to online,
which is insane at this point, bluntly, but whatever.
That's a text message I got. I'm trying to find the news story here. I'm not seeing it.
I mean, that's nuts. When most kids are now have the option of being vaccinated, we are all vaccinated. There's no indication that Omicron is any particular threat to students, and the thing is going to sweep through the society as a long time. That's not precautionary principle. That's pandemic theater at this point. That's just pandemic theater.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's
like they know this is going to rip through the society, and they want to. There's nothing that they can do essentially, and they want to look like they're doing something in advance of it. That's how I read this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is obviously all going to be. By the time this video is live, this will all be determined. I don't see any news stories about that. I just see a text from a friend saying, I don't know, maybe it's a tip. Maybe you heard something. No, in any case, what it's worth, I agree with you. I think I would keep the schools open. one of
Also,
the
but like, why not? If everybody's going to be off school as of like tomorrow for Christmas break, why not just give it the 2 weeks and see how things pan out?
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, well, the one thing that actually matters, and I say this as the spouse of a teacher, you need to give the teachers a heads up before they leave the classroom of what materials to bring home with them. So
It's fine. So you precautionarily say, hey, just because of Omicron, make sure that you bring any necessary materials
yeah,
home
no,
with
I
you just
agree.
in case we have to go to online. But in 2 weeks, we're going to have a much better sense of what
Yep.
piece we're dealing with anyway. So you could have just postponed this decision by at least a week, if not two. That's nuts. Just don't answer the question right now. Like, like just, hey, we don't know what we're dealing with. We'll know it better in a week or two. Come on. Come on.
I agree with that. There may be places where schools on an individual basis have to close because either ripping outbreaks through them or staffing shortages, but a full shutdown of the school system, this thing's going to move so fast. I don't see the point. Anyway, there was one other thing we wanted to mention, and Jen, I'm gonna leave this to you. Is there any more soul bearing we have to do on the Omicron front? Like, is there anything we haven't said yet that we should say?
No, I don't think so. Like, I hope people are not interpreting this to be either nihilistic or alarmist, because like actually I'm very much at peace with it, because it's like I said, like I think that we've done everything we can reasonably do, and there's a certain sort of acceptance to that.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. And again, like I'm not panicking. I'm not losing sleep. My personal anxiety level is moderate about this right now. I feel better than I did at the start of 2020, but I feel just at peace knowing that whatever will be will be. I was joking with you before, que sera, sera, right? Like it's something that spreads this quickly will evade us. It will outrun us. It will outmaneuver us. And I feel weirdly liberated by the fact that we're just locked in. The die is cast. We're going to find out soon enough what this means. And again, I'm
One
with you.
last thing is, I don't. I mean, I've been talking too long about Omicron, but there's a lot to talk about. But one last thing I do want to mention in the dispatch is that it looks like Jenny Russell and Charles Rusnell from CBC Edmonton have sort of quit their jobs or left voluntarily their jobs at CBC Edmonton. Now, Matt, you're a self-centered Torontonian, so you don't understand the impact of that conversation. But these guys are probably, in fact, I'd say unequivocally, the strongest investigative team in the country right now. I think they like CBC Edmonton has like these two are a powerhouse. Like I could go back and list all of the things that they've broken. I think that pound for pound, they've got more scoops than any other investigative journalist in the country. These guys are bulletproof. They're excellent. Their reputations are absolutely stellar. Why in the hell are they quitting the CBC? We're eventually going to find out, because whatever story they were working on is going to come out somewhere. But that is one that we should absolutely be keeping our eyeballs on, both for reasons that are public now and reasons that are not public that I cannot necessarily disclose in public. But there's been a lot of interesting stuff happening at CBC. We've written about some of it. I think some of the stuff we've written about is really just a taste of the depth of the cultural changes that are happening there. Mm-hmm. I don't know why Jenny and Charles have left their jobs. I don't know more about that particular story. I have a couple of guesses. My first guess is that they've obviously left over a story. Mm-hmm. I don't know what kind of story, and I don't understand the back story. So I'm working on maybe getting a little bit more information on that. But definitely that's going to be one to watch, because those two are so solid, and they're so senior, and they're so good. There's no way they leave a job like that without a really good reason.
You know what? I will say this. You're right. Center of the universe guy. I had not heard of these people. No disrespect to them. I just don't know the guys doing that job in a city I don't live in. I would know them if they were national, but I pay attention to Alberta politics because it's interesting, and I have no doubt I've read some of their stories, but like it hasn't registered with me. Oh, I've read these bylines before. But when you had mentioned this to me, I did check out their statements, and I view this with a completely neutral eye. I don't know any of the particulars. I don't know any of the background. I don't know any of the people, but I can tell you what I interpreted their statements to be. Both of them are simultaneously announcing that they are leaving. Both of them have said they will be looking for work in the new year, so they're not being poached. They haven't been scooped by a rival, but maybe there's a non-compete period. They're very explicit that they don't have a new place that they're going to. I mean, when I saw this, the first thing I said to you was, I don't know, maybe CTV got them, or maybe the Globe got them, or maybe Global News got them. But then I looked at their statements, and they're explicitly not going someplace else. They have both explicitly said that they are not leaving journalism, and they're looking forward to continuing that work. And the thing that actually jumped out at me the most was that they released statements in tandem. They're going out as a team. If this was one of them pursuing new spiritual adventures, or another one deciding to go back to law school, or like whatever, I go, okay, well, hey, people leave journalism. This is different. This is two journalists at once publicly declaring that they are leaving their employer. They're not giving up on the work, and that they are not going someplace else. They quit.
Also, it should be noted that even though Russell and Rusnell have very similar sounding names, they are not a couple. They are just an investigative team. So like they're not, and they've been working together for years. So yeah, this is very unusual for like an I team in a paper to quit, just because of the circumstances. The other thing that's unusual here is that CBC Edmonton, there's no place else to go. Like there's no like I team at CTV or Globe. Like there's no well-resourced outlet in Edmonton that is going to take them, right? Yeah. So that's what's really suspicious about all this. Like maybe they land at the Globe, but like two reporters, like nobody's going to hire two relatively expensive reporters outside of the CBC.
It's a big investment in the current media.
That's a big investment in the current media environment, and I don't see them landing at another job together. Like you might be able to afford one of them, but not both. You know what I mean? So like they are actually making a pretty significant material sacrifice to leave a job like that. Like they aren't going to do better without moving to Toronto or something like that. And even then, you know, a package deal is a hard sell. So for them to leave, they're not doing that for no reason. They're clearly quitting for a reason. They're clearly quitting for a very significant reason. I just don't know what that reason is.
No, I mean, obviously I don't either. You would know better than I would, but the broader cultural forces playing out at the CBC are something we have been watching. Problems between managers and employees, the workforce, problems, questions about mandate, questions about relevancy there's more of those text messages, questions about relevancy for a largely broadcast-based company in the framework of a digital age. Interesting stuff. We will continue to keep an eye on that. The only other thing, Jen, I know it's been a long video, and it's obviously been a one where we're talking about serious stuff. It's a weird time for us to be going on vacation. I know that, but we need the vacation. A couple other points we want to make, and I know this is going to sound, you know, kind of silly and maybe a little ass kissy. In the dispatch, we will be sending to both our paid and unpaid readers, thank you. The line has had an amazing year. It really has. We had a year-end goal for subscribers. We're going to fall short of it, but we're falling short of it by a few people. Like we're with like rounding error. Like we're just incredibly short of it. We're going to try and guilt a few more subscribers to join up and get us over by December 31st for the goal. But I mean that literally, folks. I'm not exaggerating. We're going to miss it by double digits. Like that's it. We're so close to it. Our goal remains as it was from the beginning. We're going to build this thing to the point where it is permanently self-sustaining and you and I work at it.
Don't never have to work at another newsroom again. Yeah.
We probably will, though. Like, that's the way we are. Like, I mean, I would never want to stop doing the other stuff that I'm doing, but I'd sure as hell like to have the option. Are we there yet? No. How close are we? 40-50% of the way there? We're not.
Yeah, no, we're not 10 years out from that goal. We're 1 to 2 years out from that goal. So we're doing really good.
And we're going to make a point of thanking everyone for that. The other thing we're going to mention, and this is something we're going to mention to you now in the video, there are pieces that are somewhat not urgently time sensitive, but we don't know if they're going to hold into the new year. We are on vacation as of Friday. We have pre-edited several pieces, and we are going to set them to auto-publish over the holidays. So you will continue to get some content from us here from the line after this Friday, but it's not going to be new content. It's just interesting stuff that we think you will enjoy it over the holidays. We will be back with you in the new year. God only knows what we'll be coming back to, but our dispatch will be heavy on a very sincere note of gratitude. We started this thing what 16 months ago now, basically, and we had a discussion when we did this, which was if 6 months from now, if it's a bust, we shut it down. And we go, well, that was interesting, and we refund everybody's money, and off we go. We have not been a bust. We are not yet. Again, we have a goal. We're not there yet, but we're 45% of the way to it. If we continue to have the support over the last 16 months that we have had over the next 60 months that we've had in the first 16 months, we'll get there. It could take us 2 years, maybe 3. But our thank you. I mean, I know I'm rambling here. Thank you, guys. We have thousands of paying subscribers. It is an incredible honor to do this for you. It's fun. We're enjoying it. We hope you are too. Jen, any final words?
Just I love you. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. All the rest.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll see you come hell or high water in 2022. Take care.